Service providers looking to maximize their return on investment from network virtualization need to architect their data centers for network function performance and high reliability, while leveraging pre-validated multi-vendor solutions to de-risk their deployment processes. Joining me on this live edition of TelecomTV's Main Agenda are Charlie Ashton from Wind River and Angela Whiteford from Affirmed Networks. Together we'll discuss the current state of network transformation, looking at how service providers are delivering virtualization that's both cost-effective and high performance. Charlie and Angela, good to see you both again, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about what you have learned through working with service providers that can be leveraged across the market. But first, what's the current state of NFV? Has the original brief been met? Are deployments on track? And have there been any unforeseen challenges? Angela.
Thank you, Guy. We are seeing that all major operators are scaling their deployments. They have moved past the trial and the proof of concept stage. Many operators, what we see is that when they start with a particular application or segment of the network in mind. This could be enterprise broadband services, IoT services, MVNO wholesale services, or straight to consumer services like we use every day. From that point, they then expand throughout the network. We would love to see these expansions be going faster, and I think some of the challenges around that are organizational readiness. Designing, supporting, and maintaining this new infrastructure that used to be one hardware-based platform and is now broken up into three components: the hardware, the hypervisor, and the application itself. And that requires a new skill set.
And Charlie, what's the state of NFV today?
Guy, I think it's worth mentioning that there's a big difference between network virtualization and the typical understanding of what's meant by NFV. You know, service providers have been virtualizing network functions for years, wherever it makes business sense to do so. But they're not necessarily implementing the overall architecture that was originally developed by Etsy, because that may be more complex than what they require for their specific application. And one of the key challenges that we're going to address in a few minutes is that you can't reliably run a telecom network on infrastructure that was designed for enterprise IT applications. So we'll talk about that later on during this session.
One of the selling points of NFV was that it would generate operational savings for telcos. So why aren't we hearing more about these savings? Have they actually yet materialized? Angela.
You know, they're definitely seeing savings, but they could be seeing a lot more. And this really goes back to the point that Charlie just mentioned. For example, applications like a mobile packet core, they need the underlying network or the data center design to be designed for high performance, for packet forwarding applications. And many NFVI designs that we've seen are actually stranding capacity, which is in complete conflict of the goals that operators have of driving down the cost per bit delivered on their network. That's one of their key KPIs. So what is happening is that applications, again, I can speak to a VEPC application, there's tons of CPU headroom, but they're being stranded by the NIC, the network interface capacity on the infrastructure, on the NFVI infrastructure. So you actually have a lot of headroom from a processing and application processing standpoint, but you're being starved on the NIC side. Another area that's really important in terms of savings and improving performance is around architectures that support multiple capabilities. So you're not duplicating functions. And examples of this would include things like supporting integrated DPI, integrated GI LAN services, or virtual probes that are co-located with the VNF itself. By not duplicating functions, again, you're lowering the cost and actually improving the overall performance of the application.
And Charlie, I've seen the cost savings materialize, and also, you know, what about top line growth?
Yeah, I think it's very important to remember that the other premise when NFV was first discussed was that it would boost the top line revenue for the service providers by enabling them to accelerate the introduction of new services that delivered new value to both enterprise customers and consumers. I think that's why we're seeing carriers start to investigate applications like industrial IoT, which enable them to sell new kinds of services to new kinds of customers. And then as they evaluate these new kinds of applications, it's really important that the VNFs can be optimally tuned and optimally scaled for those use cases, which is something that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
And Charlie, a follow-up question then. What's wrong with using enterprise IT equipment rather than opting for more sophisticated telco-grade, higher performance hardware?
Oh, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using IT class servers. That's always been one of the key benefits of NFV because it drives down both CapEx and OpEx. So it's very important to the whole foundation of NFV. And then, of course, we have to remember that virtualization is really the key technology that enables the consolidation of multiple software functions onto a single server platform. And at the same time, enables you to preserve both the isolation and the security that are critical for multi-tenant applications. So the real key here to using IT class servers is to ensure that those servers are configured to provide the right level of resources. And at the same time, you also need to run a software virtualization platform that's going to ensure the telco-grade uptime that's critical to avoiding any SLA penalties.
And Angela, let's look at accelerated switches for data centers. First of all, what are they, and how do they work? And if done right, what performance gains can a telco reasonably expect to achieve?
Great question. So when we first moved to virtualization, operators had to make a trade-off between high performance or cloud management functionality with vSwitch. What we've seen now is technologies like the accelerated vSwitch give you the best of both worlds. And leading vendors like Wind River have come up with an accelerated vSwitch solution that provides fantastic performance and full cloud virtualization capabilities. And in the deployments where we've worked together with the Affirmed vEPC running on Titanium Cloud, we've seen somewhere between 80% of line rate performance, which is, again, fantastic and some of the highest numbers in the market.
And Charlie, why are accelerated switches important then?
Well, I think it's worth talking about why this fantastic performance, and thank you, Angela, why this matters here. And it really all comes down to making the virtualized functions cost effective. Service providers do a lot of work to quantify the cost per subscriber for delivering a function like a virtual EPC in a virtualized environment, as compared to delivering it using traditional physical equipment. So cost per subscriber is a really key metric. And the Affirmed virtual EPC leverages the accelerated virtual switch in Titanium Cloud, as Angela mentioned, to maximize the number of processor cores that are running the revenue-generating service, which is the virtual EPC. So the cost per subscriber then means that it actually makes business sense to deploy the virtualized function as opposed to physical equipment.
Okay, so it's probably worth taking a bit of time here to look at the telco revenue model, i.e. revenue versus cost versus volume. Telco revenue models are producing less revenue per bit, but it seems that volumes of revenue are not offsetting these cost increases, so something obviously has to give. Is it down to much greater cost reductions, and what level of reduction in TCO could telcos expect? Charlie?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked about that, because at Wind River, we've put a big focus on modeling the total cost of ownership, TCO benefits, that can be achieved by different types of software infrastructure platforms running applications like the Affirmed virtual EPC. We've actually developed a tool that allows our customers, the service providers, to model their specific use cases. And we've seen scenarios where service providers have used this tool to project that they could save $4 or $5 billion in cost over a 5-year period by running the virtual EPC on the Titanium Cloud virtualization platform rather than on either a commercial IT class platform or maybe one that they develop themselves using a roll your own approach, so that the cost savings can be very, very significant and can mount up to billions of dollars over the period that they're modeling.
And Angela, do you want to add your insight to this as well?
Sure, absolutely. I think two other key areas of focus are really important here, and that is around automation and analytics. Today, many operators are rolling out 3 to 4 new services a year, and this is typically very time-consuming and a very manual process. They need to be moving to a model where they're rolling 10x the amount of services of what they're doing right now. I mean, this is typically their over-the-top competition. That's what they're doing. Using real-time analytics to validate how a service is doing, changes that you need to make. Maybe potentially the service isn't working at all and you need to start over, so the fail-fast concept. But being able to automate the provisioning of new services and using the real-time analytics to tweak and improve the service is critical. And now with virtualization, you have the underlying infrastructure that allows you to do that.
So linked to this is how can telcos accurately calculate revenue and cost by maxing out the efficient utilization of processor resources? It seems to me that this isn't a very easy calculation. So how can you help them with it, Charlie?
Yeah, you're right. It's not an easy calculation. And the key question really is the utilization of processor cores. Because the more cores that have to be used by platform functions, like the virtual switch, the operating system, the hypervisor, the VIM, that just means that fewer cores are left over for running functions like a virtual EPC that actually generate revenue. So our TCO tool that I mentioned previously actually calculates the optimum balance between the allocation of cores to run the virtual switch and the cores that will then consume the amount of traffic that's being switched by the virtual switch. The end result of this is very important because it determines the number of servers that you actually need to deploy. And it's that number of servers that is very, very critical to the overall calculation of TCO.
And Angela?
I have one statement. Cores are gold. And any partner that's making the most efficient use of processor cores is critical, driving down that cost per bit that I mentioned earlier, which is a key KPI for most mobile operators.
Angela, what's the role of pre-integration then? NFV promised to remove vendor lock-in and open the doors for this multi-vendor environment. But the reality is that all this equipment and all these VNFs have to work together, which requires considerable resources to get right. Should a telco have to do this? How important is it for them to choose a multi-vendor solution where 2 or more vendors have already worked together to pre-validate everything?
Look, the goal of virtualization was giving operators choice. Giving operators choice, driving down the cost of the network, and as well providing flexibility or agility to deliver new services. So when a vendor tells an operator that to deliver the best performance, to deliver the highest reliability, you have to buy their VNF with their hypervisor distribution, with their hardware, this is blatantly wrong. You're basically buying a proprietary hardware-based solution all over again, which goes completely against virtualization. However, you do need to work with vendors that have a partner ecosystem that allows you to validate and benchmark the integrated solution. And this reduces the time to market. It allows operators to hit their business case KPIs. The challenge with that is it puts more workload on us, vendors like Affirmed and like Wind River. And we really need that ecosystem of a community to pull together. Doing the pre-testing and validation is going to be important for scaling and delivering on the metrics. I mentioned earlier that organizational readiness is one of the big challenges within the operators right now. Vendors' ability to offer up a build, operate, transfer model, providing those capabilities are critical to help operators make the transition. They can actually run alongside their vendors and learn the necessary skills and then take over the network.
Great. And Charlie?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we got onto this topic. I think it's critically important. You know, when we launched the Titanium Cloud virtualization platform, we knew that service providers really need proven end-to-end use cases that are based on multi-vendor solutions. So we launched our Titanium Cloud ecosystem in mid-2014 We have over 50 partners now, including Affirmed, of course. So at this point, we've got over 4 years experience in working with VNF partners to onboard their VNFs. I can tell you, initially, the process was very, very painful. But we've actually seen big improvements in the past couple of years. So at this point, we believe that the VNF vendors like Affirmed, who want to support a truly decoupled multi-vendor model, will definitely be able to do so.
So the message for telcos then is meet performance demands, maintain reliability, and launch services faster. And you can leverage NFV without sacrificing the reliability and performance of hardware networking solutions. In which case, how can Affirmed and Wind River help? Angela, from Affirmed, how can Affirmed help?
Thank you. So from an Affirmed perspective, we offer a suite of VNFs that have all been pre-tested and integrated, as Charlie and I discussed earlier. And one of the important things is, as you're making the transition to an NFV-based architecture, you want to have the capabilities in place to do so. So I mentioned earlier this concept of virtual probes. You see a V on every one of our VNFs in this slide. Having an integrated probe is critical when you move to virtualized functions because your VMs are moving. There's no real demarcation point anymore. So how do you get network performance and analytics in real time? Co-locating probes are going to be very important. Operators are looking at the horizon of 5G. Do you have an architecture that supports the transition from wherever you are, 2G, 3G, 4G, all the way to 5G in a seamless manner? And having an architecture and a partner that provides those VNFs are important. And then again, the underlying infrastructure with Titanium Cloud that ensures that you have the reliability and the performance with capabilities such as an accelerated vSwitch to hit the metrics that operators are looking for. And to underline all of that, this solution that we're showcasing here has been validated in real customer environments, and that's important as well. There are many vendors out there that will put up a nice chart of all these different logos. For Wind River and Affirmed, these are all real deployments.
Thanks, Angela. And Charlie, how can Wind River help telcos?
Well, obviously I echo all the comments that Angela just made there. I think what's important is that from a business point of view, the collaboration between Wind River and Affirmed is really all about reducing the risk and accelerating the schedule for service providers who want to deploy a virtual EPC function with the confidence that it's going to run with telco-grade uptime and also that it's going to be cost-effective thanks to the level of performance that it delivers. So that's what our collaboration is all about, and that's really the bottom line benefit that it's delivering to service providers around the world.
Thanks, Charlie. We've got a couple of minutes, I think, to look to our audience questions. We have a question in here from an audience viewer. I'm going to ask it to both of you, but Angela, I'm going to ask it to you first. Is there a best practice methodology around testing and integration of VNFs?
Let's talk about why testing and integration is so important first, right? As we discussed earlier, as operators make the transition to NFV-based architecture, every operator has a set of metrics or KPIs that they've developed in the business case in order to make the move forward, and they're tracking that. And as I mentioned, you typically start with a given use case, IoT, enterprise, consumer, wholesale, and then they expand from there. It is really important to hit those performance metrics, reliability metrics, cost per bit delivered metrics, and validate those for the given project they start with, because the goal is actually to permeate an NFV architecture throughout their entire network. So this is the critical first step, and testing and validation is paramount in terms of getting to that point.
And Charlie, do you want to have a crack at this question as well?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we actually have over 4 years experience now in working with VNF partners to onboard their VNFs. And we've built a very formal process for doing this so that we can avoid any surprises in terms of that engagement. So we start with an in-depth review that involves technical experts both from Wind River and also from our partner company like Affirmed. And during that technical review, what we're doing is we're trying to identify upfront any potential issues that we could expect during an integration or a validation phase, and then we figure out upfront how we're going to resolve them. Then during the validation process itself, we follow a very formal checklist that covers both functionality as well as performance testing. And the end result of all of this is a very comprehensive validation report that actually we sign off by both companies, which we can then share with our mutual customers who are interested in evaluating that joint solution. I think it's also worth mentioning that we've actually had very good results at recent plug fests hosted by OPNFV and Etsy, and now actually together. As an example, at one plug fest last year, we were able to demonstrate full interoperability between Titanium Cloud and 15 VNFs. And in many cases, it was actually the first time that we'd done any testing at all with these products. So we were pretty pleased to be able to prove interoperability in all cases. So I think just in conclusion, we believe at Wind River that the industry is definitely getting better at achieving the kind of interoperability that's going to be so critical for service providers who are moving to virtualized network functions. It's taken a while, but we've really seen major progress here in the past couple of years.
That's really good to hear. Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Angela. Well, we've unfortunately come to the end of our program. I'd like to thank all of you who joined us live and submitted questions. So sorry we couldn't get through all of them. And to all of you watching this program on demand. It just remains me to thank my guests today, Charlie Ashton and Angela Whiteford. We appreciate your input and valuable insights. And also to thank Wind River for sponsoring today's program. From all of us here at TelecomTV, thanks for watching and goodbye.